I always try to remember the ABCs of water safety when I'm out on the river with my family. So A stands for always wear a PFD. A PFD is otherwise known as a personal flotation device or a life jacket. B is what I like to call butt down, feet up. So if you happen to come out of your vessel, I always like to position myself to where I am facing downstream so I can see the obstructions coming up my way. I always like to keep my butt down in the water and my feet above the water. So it's a natural position if you're wearing your life jacket like you're supposed to, and that will keep you free of getting tangled up in obstructions under the water. C is climb the root wad. So if you're coming up on a root wad and there's no way that you can get away from it, what I would prefer to do is swim aggressively toward the root wad or strainer and get on top of it. That way it will keep you from getting washed underneath it and getting tangled and not being able to get out. So if you're floating throughout the day and you happen to, like I said, come out of the boat unexpectedly or something like that, there could be root wads under the surface of the water. There could be rocks with jagged edges that we just can't see with our eyes, but they're there. So it's important to know that there are things underneath the surface of the water that even though we can't see it, they are there. So lakes are the same way. They can have typically a lot more boat traffic in the summertime. So it's kind of important to make sure that you are swimming in an area that is away from the boat traffic. Try to stay away from the wakes that come from the boat traffic because those can easily overcome you. And just make sure that you know your limits. If you're not a strong swimmer, then it's best to stay out of deep water that could be over your head. Yeah, currents, we might not think much of them, but they can pull us away from safe locations easily. You never know what is going to happen when you get pulled out into a current. It's best to just not fight the current, wait until you see it eddy, and then swim vigorously toward that eddy if you can. So to keep your kids safe on Missouri's lakes and rivers, it's also important to make sure that they have a life jacket that fits them properly. Secondly, it's important to make sure that you are keeping an eye on them at all times. Don't let them get away from you. Don't let them get out in water that's too deep for them, and make sure that they are paying attention to their surroundings. So some things to avoid doing when you're out on the waterways is drinking an excess amount of alcohol. It's important to stay hydrated throughout the day by drinking water and limiting the alcohol until after your float or after your day out on the boat. So that's one thing that's very important to do. Secondly, it's important to know the rules and regulations for the area that you're going to. So knowing the rules ahead of time can save you from some trouble later on. I always tell people to float in groups. So a good rule of thumb is 3 or more in your group. And if something were to happen to one of you and one of you became seriously injured and unable to continue your float or your time out on the water, one person could stay with you and render you aid while another person can go and get help. Another thing is to just bring a cell phone with you or some type of device where you can call emergency services. And lastly, to make a float plan. If you are going to put in on one section of the river and take out on another, it's important to let someone know where you're putting in and taking out at, how long you plan to be gone, and who you're going to be with. Then if you don't return when you say that you're supposed to, the emergency services can pinpoint your location on the river and have a good rule of thumb on where to possibly find you at.